For 18 years, I, David Miller, 45, believed in Eleanor, in our solid, unshakable life. I thought our marriage was built on trust, a fortress against the world. That was my fundamental lie. It shattered last night, right at our kitchen table, when Eleanor, with a predatory glint in her eyes, invited her lover, Julian, to dinner and suggested I join their intimate fantasies. How could I have been so blind? Within hours, her laptop revealed months of explicit emails with Julian, hotel receipts for two, and shell company invoices showing millions siphoned from her company. The entire edifice of my life crumbled in a single, catastrophic night. This morning, Eleanor sat at our kitchen island, scrolling her tablet, sipping coffee from her world's greatest hotelier mug, utterly oblivious to the storm I was about to unleash. Before I do, take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story earns it. Drop your city and your local time in the comments. I like knowing who's out there. The next morning, Eleanor acted like nothing had happened. She sat at the kitchen island, scrolling through her tablet and sipping coffee from the mug I bought her last Christmas. World's greatest hotelier, it said. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'm thinking of redecorating the master suite at the Sterling Grand, she said without looking up. Something more modern, less masculine. The current design feels so staid. I was making oatmeal for Chloe's breakfast, trying to maintain some normalcy in our rapidly deteriorating household. Staid? You mean the custom-built furniture I designed and assembled myself? It's very artisanal, David, Eleanor said, finally meeting my eyes. But I'm thinking we need a change. A fresh start. Chloe stumbled into the kitchen, earbuds in, backpack slung over one shoulder. She grabbed a granola bar and headed for the door. Breakfast, I called after her. I'll eat at school, she mumbled. Chloe, sit down and eat with your family, Eleanor said sharply. Our daughter stopped, pulled out one earbud, and looked between us. Even at 17, she could read the room better than most adults. Are you guys getting divorced? She asked bluntly. The question hung in the air like a critical system error. Eleanor's coffee cup paused halfway to her lips. I kept stirring the oatmeal. The only sound the soft bubbling in the pot. Don't be dramatic, Eleanor finally said. Your father and I are just exploring new dynamics in our relationship. Gross, Mom. Just say you're having a midlife crisis like a normal person. I couldn't help but smile. Chloe had inherited my analytical mind and Eleanor's sharp tongue. Dangerous combination. After Chloe left for school, Eleanor disappeared into her home office, ostensibly to prepare for a new acquisition proposal. I knew better. She was texting Julian, probably planning their next move. I'd seen the signs for months. Late nights at the office, new designer lingerie hidden in the back of her drawer, whispered phone calls that ended when I entered the room. I should have confronted her then, should have demanded the truth. Instead, I'd chosen to believe her lies because the alternative was admitting that everything I'd built was crumbling. But last night had changed everything. The mask was off. I drove to the old community center where I'd trained in my 20s, before Eleanor convinced me that competitive chess was beneath someone with my technical intelligence. Marcus's chess club hadn't changed much. Still smelled like old paper, stale coffee, and quiet ambition. The old man himself was hunched over a board, analyzing a complex endgame. His mind still sharp despite being north of 70. Well, I'll be damned, Marcus said, looking up, his eyes twinkling. David Miller. Thought you were too busy optimizing networks for us working-class strategists these days. Never too busy for you, Marcus. He studied my face with the eyes of someone who'd seen a lot of players both at the board and out. Trouble at home? I told him about Eleanor's fantasy dinner, about Julian, about the slow dissolution of my marriage. Marcus listened without judgment, occasionally nodding or grunting in understanding. Women like that, he said when I finished, they don't respect weakness. You've been playing defense for years, letting her dictate the moves. Time to go on offense. I threatened Julian with a wrench. Pretty sure that counts as offense. Marcus chuckled. That was just a warning shot. Real fighting happens up here. He tapped his temple. You're smarter than both of them combined. Use that. I spent an hour working through complex chess problems, my mind remembering the patterns, even after all these years. Each move was Eleanor's smug smile. Each combination was Julian's entitled grin. By the time I finished, my head was clear, my strategy forming. When I got home, Eleanor was getting ready for some industry function. She'd laid out a sleek black gown on our bed, new, expensive, and cut to show off assets I'd apparently stopped appreciating. I'll be late tonight, she said, applying lipstick in the bathroom mirror. Hospitality gala. Will Julian be there? Her hand paused for just a second. Probably. He works for the Sterling Collection, David. Right. Silly me. She turned to face me, her blue eyes flashing with irritation. Are you going to be weird about this? Because I won't tolerate jealousy and paranoia. Wouldn't dream of it, I said. Have fun. After she left, I did something I'd never done before. I went through her things, not proud of it, but desperate times and all that. In her nightstand drawer, under a stack of industry reports, I found a receipt from the Sterling Grand, downtown. Room service for 2, champagne, artisanal chocolates. The date was last Tuesday, when she'd supposedly been working late on the Paradise Point acquisition. My hands shook as I photographed the receipt with my phone. 18 years of marriage and it had come to this. Gathering evidence like I was investigating a corporate fraud, but the real smoking gun was in her laptop bag. She'd forgotten to close her email. And there it was. Months of correspondence with Julian. Not just work emails, but personal messages that made my stomach turn. Can't wait to feel you inside me again, read one from last week. David suspects nothing. He's too busy playing handyman, read another. The worst part wasn't the explicit details of their affair. It was how they talked about me, like I was a joke. A pathetic husband too stupid to see what was happening under his own roof. I printed everything. Every email, every text message thread I could access. Every receipt and credit card statement that told the story of my wife's double life. The evidence filled a manila folder that I locked in my toolbox in the garage. Eleanor came home at 2 o'clock in the morning, reeking of expensive wine and cologne that wasn't mine. She slipped into bed thinking I was asleep. How was the gala? I asked quietly. She stiffened. Fine, boring, actually. Julian there? I don't remember. I was networking with potential investors. I rolled over to face her in the dark. Eleanor, do you love me? The question seemed to surprise her. She was quiet for a long moment. That's a complicated question, David. No, it's not. It's the simplest question in the world. Another long pause. Then, I love the life we've built. I love our family. That's not what I asked. She turned away from me. I'm tired, David. Can we talk about this tomorrow? But I already had my answer, and tomorrow I was going to start doing something about it. Eleanor's industry gala was the following Friday at some exclusive rooftop lounge downtown. She'd made it clear I wasn't invited. It's really more of a networking thing, honey. But Marcus had other ideas. You're going, he said during our strategy session that afternoon. Time to see what you're really dealing with. She doesn't want me there. Since when do you need permission to attend your wife's work events? He had a point. In the early years of our marriage, I'd been Eleanor's +1 to every Sterling Collection function. Somewhere along the way, I'd become an embarrassment. She preferred to hide me. I showered, put on my best suit, the charcoal one Eleanor had picked out for her business school graduation, and drove downtown. The lounge was one of those places where the cocktails were artisanal and the prices were astronomical. Through the panoramic window, I could see Eleanor holding court near the bar, laughing at something Julian was whispering in her ear. The hostess tried to stop me, but I brushed past her. "I'm with the Sterling collection party." Eleanor's face went white when she saw me. Julian, on the other hand, looked like he might bolt for the emergency exit. "David," Eleanor said, her voice tight with forced cheer. "What a surprise." "Thought I'd surprise my wife," I said loudly enough for nearby conversations to pause. "Hope you don't mind me crashing the party." Several of Eleanor's colleagues turned to watch. I recognized most of them from previous functions, back when I was still considered worthy of inclusion. "Of course not," Eleanor said through gritted teeth. "How thoughtful." I walked to the bar and ordered a whiskey. Neat. The bartender was a young guy with sleeve tattoos and the kind of smirk that said he'd seen plenty of domestic drama play out over his bar. "Make it a double," I added. Eleanor appeared at my elbow. "What are you doing here, David?" "Supporting my wife's career." "Isn't that what good husbands do?" "You're embarrassing yourself." "Am I, or am I embarrassing you?" Before she could answer, Julian materialized on my other side. Up close, he was even prettier than I'd remembered. Perfect teeth, perfect hair, probably perfect abs under that tailored shirt. "Hey, David," he said, extending his hand like we were old friends. "Glad you could make it." I looked at his hand, but didn't take it. "Julian, still breathing, I see." His smile faltered. Eleanor stepped between us. "Why don't you get some of the gourmet canapés, honey?" she suggested. "The scallop ceviche is supposed to be excellent." "I'm not hungry for ceviche," I said, my eyes never leaving Julian's face. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Other party guests were starting to stare openly now. Eleanor's boss, a silver-haired shark named Mr. Sterling himself, was watching from across the room with obvious interest. That's when inspiration struck. I picked up my drink and pretended to stumble. Accidentally, dumping the entire contents down the front of Julian's pristine white shirt and expensive suit jacket. "Oh crap," I said loudly. "I'm so sorry, man. How clumsy of me." Julian jumped back, whiskey dripping from his chin. "What the heck?" "Honest mistake," I said, grabbing napkins from the bar. "Here, let me help you clean up." I started dabbing at his shirt, pressing harder than necessary. He tried to push my hands away, but I kept at it, making the stain worse. "It's fine," he said through clenched teeth. "I'll handle it." No, I insist. "It's the least I can do." I looked around the room at all the watching faces. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to propose a toast." Eleanor grabbed my arm. "David, don't." But I was already raising my empty glass. "To Julian Thorne, rising star, and my wife's close colleague." The room went dead silent. Julian's face turned red. Eleanor looked like she might faint. "May his performance in the boardroom be better than his performance in other areas," I continued. Mr. Sterling started moving toward us, but I wasn't finished. "And to my loving wife, Eleanor, who's always believed in exploring new business strategies, sometimes with multiple parties involved." That's when Julian lunged at me. I saw it coming a mile away. Years of anticipating chess moves kicked in, and I sidestepped his clumsy swing, letting his momentum carry him into the bar. Bottles rattled, the bartender swore. "Gentlemen, please." Mr. Sterling barked, but the damage was done. Security appeared from somewhere. Two big guys in cheap suits who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. They grabbed Julian by his ruined jacket and started escorting him toward the door. "This isn't over," he snarled at me. "Yeah, it is," I replied calmly. Eleanor followed them out, leaving me alone at the bar with a room full of hoteliers who were suddenly very interested in their drinks. The bartender looked at me with something approaching respect. Another double? He asked. Make it a triple. My phone buzzed with a text from Chloe. Dad, Mom's work party is all over Instasnap. Are you okay? I looked around the room at Eleanor's colleagues, all of them whispering and stealing glances at me. Tomorrow, this story would be all over the hospitality community. Eleanor's reputation, so carefully cultivated over the years, had just taken a major hit, and I was just getting started. I typed back to Chloe, never better, sweetheart. Never better. The fallout from the rooftop lounge incident was swift and brutal. By Monday morning, Eleanor wasn't speaking to me. She'd moved into the guest suite and was communicating through Chloe, who was clearly uncomfortable being caught in the middle. Mom says you need to apologize to Julian, Chloe told me over breakfast. Mom can tell me that herself, I replied, not looking up from my coffee. She also says you're having some kind of breakdown. Now, I did look up. What do you think, Chloe? Am I having a breakdown? My daughter studied my face with the intensity of someone who'd inherited both parents' analytical minds. I think Mom's been acting weird for months, and you finally noticed. Smart kid. Too smart for her own good, maybe. Eleanor emerged from her office looking like she'd slept about as well as I had. Her usually perfect blonde hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and there were dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. We need to talk, she said. Now you want to talk? Not here, she glanced at Chloe. Somewhere private. We ended up at The Daily Grind, a small, independent coffee shop on Main Street, the same place where we'd had our first casual date 20 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. We sat in a corner booth, 2 cups of cold brew growing cold between us while we stared at each other like strangers. You humiliated me, Eleanor said finally. I humiliated you. That's rich. In front of my colleagues, Mr. Sterling himself. Do you have any idea what this could do to my career? I pulled out my phone and opened the photo gallery, the pictures of her hotel receipts, the screenshots of her emails with Julian, the credit card statements showing charges at high-end restaurants I'd never been to. Do you have any idea what this could do to our marriage? I asked, sliding the phone across the table. Eleanor's face went through a series of expressions, surprise, anger, fear, and finally something that might have been relief. You went through my things. You left them lying around. Sloppy work for a hotelier. She pushed the phone back to me without scrolling through the evidence. So, what now? You want a divorce? Do you? Another long pause. The coffee shop was nearly empty except for a lone remote worker at a table and an elderly couple sharing a pastry. Normal people living normal lives, probably not sitting in coffee shops confronting 18 years of lies. I want you to fight for me, Eleanor said quietly. The admission caught me off guard. What? All these months, I've been waiting for you to notice, to care, to do something other than fix the stupid router and pretend everything was fine. So you had an affair to get my attention? I had an affair because I felt invisible in my own marriage. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. When was the last time you looked at me? Really looked at me like I was something more than just another household appliance. I wanted to argue, to defend myself, but the words stuck in my throat. Because maybe somewhere deep down I knew she was right. We'd fallen into a routine so comfortable it had become a prison. Julian makes me feel alive, she continued. He sees me as a woman, not just a wife and mother. Julian sees you as a conquest, I said. Trust me, I've read his emails. You're not his first married woman, and you won't be his last. Something flickered across her face, doubt, maybe, or hurt. At least he tries, she said. We sat in silence for a while, both of us lost in our own thoughts. Finally, Eleanor reached across the table and touched my hand. It doesn't have to end like this, David. We could try counseling, work things out. For a moment, I almost believed her, almost let myself hope that we could find our way back to whatever we'd had in the beginning. But then I remembered the cruel laughter in her voice when she'd invited Julian to dinner. The way she'd looked at me like I was pathetic. What about Julian? It's over with him. It has to be, after what happened at the lounge. Because you got caught, or because you realized it was wrong? She pulled her hand back. Does it matter? Yeah, Eleanor, it matters. She looked out the window at the bustling street where a young couple was getting into an old sedan, laughing about something. They looked happy, in love, the way we used to look. I can't promise it won't happen again, she said finally. I can't promise I won't get bored or lonely or stupid, but I can promise to try. It wasn't enough. Not anymore. I want you out, I said. Her head snapped back to me. What? I want you out of the house tonight. David, be reasonable. Where am I supposed to go? I don't know. Maybe Julian has a spare suite. You can't just kick me out of my own house. Actually, I can. The house is in my name. Remember? You were too busy with business school when we bought it, so I handled all the paperwork. It was a low blow, and we both knew it. But 18 years of marriage had taught me exactly where to aim to cause maximum damage. Eleanor's face hardened. Fine, but I'm taking Chloe with me. Like heck you are. She's my daughter, too. She's 17 years old. In this state, she can choose which parent to live with. Want to bet which one she picks? We stared at each other across the table. Two people who'd once promised to love each other until death do us part. Now calculating how much damage we could inflict. This is really how you want to play it? Eleanor asked. You started this game when you invited your boyfriend to dinner. I'm just playing to win. She stood up, threw a $5 bill on the table, and walked out without another word. I watched her drive away in her luxury SUV, probably heading straight to Julian's penthouse to cry on his shoulder. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You think you've won something, but you have no idea what you've started. I showed the message to the barista, a middle-aged woman named Carla, who'd been working at the daily grind since before I was born. Sounds like someone's mad at you, honey, she said, refilling my coffee cup. Yeah, I said. And I'm just getting started making them matter. Eleanor moved in with her best friend, Bethany, a social media influencer who treated drama like currency and always seemed to have her phone out recording everything. Bethany lived in a trendy downtown loft that screamed, curated lifestyle, exposed brick walls, industrial lighting, and furniture that looked expensive but uncomfortable. I knew this because Chloe told me. Despite Eleanor's attempts to turn our daughter against me, Chloe had chosen to stay at the house. Partly because her friends were all in our school district, but mostly because she was tired of her mother's BS. Mom's acting crazy, Chloe said one evening while we ate takeout Thai on the couch. She keeps crying and saying you ruined her life. What do you think? Chloe considered this while twirling a noodle around her chopsticks. I think she ruined her own life when she started cheating on you. I'm not stupid, Dad. I knew something was going on. You never said anything. Would it have mattered? Adults never listen to kids about this stuff anyway. She had a point. At 17, Chloe had already developed a cynicism that probably came from watching her parents' marriage slowly disintegrate. Are you okay with all this? I asked. She shrugged. Are you going to start dating other people? The question caught me off guard. I haven't really thought about it. Good, because that would be weird. At least wait until I graduate. I laughed despite everything. Deal. The next few days fell into a strange rhythm. I went to work, troubleshooting network issues and pretending my personal life wasn't imploding. Chloe went to school and came home with updates on Eleanor's increasingly erratic behavior. And somewhere across town, Eleanor and Julian were probably plotting their next move. I didn't have to wait long to find out what that would be. Thursday night, I was in the garage working on an old server I'd been restoring when 3 luxury cars pulled into my driveway, Eleanor's SUV, Julian's sports coupe, and a sleek black sedan I didn't recognize. Car doors slammed, and I could hear voices, angry voices approaching. I wiped my hands on a shop rag and stepped outside. Eleanor was leading a small army, Julian, Bethany, and 2 other women I recognized from the Sterling Collections executive team. They looked like they were ready for war. "David," Eleanor called out, her voice carrying across the yard. "We need to talk. We already talked at the daily grind, remember? This is different." They arranged themselves on my front lawn like a firing squad. Julian hung back, probably remembering our last encounter. "Smart move. What's this about, Eleanor?" "It's about you spreading lies and trying to destroy my reputation." "I haven't told any lies. Everything I said at the lounge was true." Bethany stepped forward, her phone already out and recording. "You attacked Julian. That's assault. We have witnesses. I spilled a drink on him. Accidents happen." "It wasn't an accident," Julian said, finally finding his voice. "You deliberately, prove it," I interrupted. One of the other women, a sharp-featured brunette whose name I couldn't remember, spoke up. "Eleanor's told us everything about your controlling behavior, your threats, your refusal to let her explore her romantic freedom." I almost laughed. "Is that what she told you? That I'm controlling? Aren't you?" Bethany asked, still recording. "You kicked her out of her own house. You're trying to turn her daughter against her. Her daughter chose to stay with me, and it's my house, not hers." "That's not how marriage works," the brunette said. "Community property doesn't apply when one spouse commits corporate malfeasance," I finished. "I'm sure Eleanor can explain the legal implications to you. She is a hotelier, after all." Eleanor's face was flushed with anger and embarrassment. "You're being vindictive, David. This isn't about the law. It's about doing what's right. You want to talk about what's right? Let's talk about honesty, commitment, respect. You know, all those things you promised when we got married." "People change," Julian said. "Eleanor's evolved beyond your narrow definition of marriage. That did it." I stepped closer to him, close enough that he instinctively backed up. "Evolved? Is that what you call being with your business partner's wife, Julian?" Eleanor snapped. "No, let's be honest here. Your boyfriend thinks adultery is evolution. I think it's just being a selfish piece of crap." Bethany was practically bouncing with excitement, her phone capturing every word. This would probably be all over social media within the hour. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," Eleanor said. "All we want is a civilized conversation about how to move forward." "Civilized? You brought a camera crew to my front yard to ambush me. How is that civilized?" "We're documenting your behavior for the divorce proceedings," the brunette explained. "Your threats, your aggression." "What threats? What aggression?" "I've been a model of restraint, considering my wife invited her boyfriend to dinner and then moved in with her influencer friend when I objected." I looked directly at Bethany's phone camera. "For the record, I haven't threatened anyone. I haven't been violent or aggressive. I simply refuse to be a loser in my own home. If that makes me the bad guy, so be it." The group exchanged glances. This clearly wasn't going the way they planned. "We're trying to be reasonable," Eleanor said. "No, you're trying to manipulate me into accepting an unacceptable situation. There's a difference." "So, what do you want?" Julian asked. I looked at each of them in turn, Eleanor with her righteous indignation, Julian with his entitled smirk, Bethany with her phone, the other women with their judgment. "I want you off my property," I said quietly. "All of you. Now." "We're not done talking," Eleanor said. "Yeah, we are." I walked back into the garage and hit the button to close the door. Through the window, I watched them argue among themselves for a few minutes before finally getting back in their cars and driving away. My phone rang almost immediately. Brenda from across the street. "You okay over there, David? Looked like quite a powwow on your lawn." "Just Eleanor being dramatic." "Well, if you need anything, you know where to find me. I've got a baseball bat and no patience for BS." I smiled for the first time in days. "Thanks, Brenda. I'll keep that in mind." After she hung up, I sat in my garage surrounded by tools and server components, thinking about allies and enemies. Eleanor had her little army of enablers, people who would support her no matter what she did because they shared her twisted worldview. But I had something better. I had people who understood right from wrong. People who believed in loyalty and commitment. People who wouldn't abandon their principles for the sake of being progressive or evolved. I was going to need them for what came next. The final confrontation came at the Pinnacle Awards, the annual gala for the Pacific Northwest Hospitality Association, an event Eleanor had been planning for months before our marriage imploded. She was on the organizing committee, which meant she couldn't skip it without damaging her professional reputation even further. I wasn't supposed to be there. My invitation had been mysteriously lost in the mail, according to Bethany, who was handling publicity for the event. But Marcus had a solution. "My nephew owns the AV tech company that's running the show," he explained during our strategy session. "You're working security for the night, monitoring the tech." The gala was held at the Grandeur Ballroom at the Sterling Grand, a fancy downtown venue where the region's hospitality and business elite gathered to write tax-deductible checks and pat themselves on the back. I arrived early, wearing a black suit and an earpiece that made me look official. Eleanor looked stunning in a shimmering silver gown that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. She was holding court near the silent auction tables, playing the role of the grieving hotelier whose husband had abandoned her during a difficult time. Julian hovered nearby like a personal assistant, probably thinking he was protecting her from me. Bethany was there, too, of course, along with Eleanor's other supporters from the Sterling Collections executive team. They'd formed a protective circle around her, whispering and shooting dirty looks at anyone who might ask uncomfortable questions about her personal life. I stayed in the background for the first hour, watching and waiting. The hotel's internal security team knew I was there. Marcus's nephew had vouched for me, but they didn't know why. As far as they were concerned, I was just extra tech support, ensuring the presentations ran smoothly. The speeches started at 9 o'clock. Various industry leaders took the podium to talk about the importance of innovation and community in hospitality. Eleanor was scheduled to speak last as the committee chairwoman. That's when I made my move. I walked to the back of the ballroom and found the main AV control booth, manned by a college-aged kid who looked bored out of his mind. "Emergency," I told him, flashing a fake security badge I'd made at a local print shop. "We need to check the projection system for a critical vulnerability." Someone called in a threat about a potential data breach targeting the main screens. The kid looked confused, but handed over the laptop that controlled the room's displays. "I don't see anything unusual. Let me take a look." I plugged in a flash drive containing every piece of evidence I'd gathered about Eleanor's affair and the financial irregularities. Emails, photos, credit card statements, hotel receipts, shell company invoices, everything that told the story of her double life and the siphoning of funds from the Sterling collection. "Looks clean," I told the kid, handing back the laptop. False alarm. Good job staying vigilant. I returned to my position near the wall and waited. Eleanor took the podium to thunderous applause. She looked radiant under the spotlights, every inch the successful professional woman who'd overcome personal adversity to lead the industry. "Thank you all for being here tonight," she began. "As many of you know, this industry is deeply personal to me. When our own flagship property faced a challenging renovation 3 years ago, I saw firsthand how important integrity and trust are to our community." The audience was eating it up. Eleanor had always been a compelling speaker, able to command a room with her presence and conviction. "Integrity is everything," she continued. The bonds we forge, the commitments we make, the trust we build, these are the foundations of a healthy enterprise. That's when I activated the presentation I'd loaded onto the system. The screens around the room suddenly filled with Eleanor's emails to Julian. Explicit messages detailing their intimate encounters, mocking comments about me. David suspects nothing. He's too busy playing handyman, plans for future rendezvous. The audience gasped and murmured, trying to process what they were seeing. Eleanor froze at the podium, her face draining of color. "The trust we build," I said loudly from the back of the room, my voice carrying clearly through the sound system, "is sacred. When that trust is broken, when those commitments are abandoned, the whole foundation crumbles." All eyes turned to me as I walked down the center aisle toward the stage. Eleanor gripped the podium like it was the only thing keeping her upright. "Ladies and gentlemen," I continued, "I'd like to tell you about integrity and commitment, about what happens when someone decides that business ethics and marriage vows are just suggestions." Security was starting to move toward me, but they were confused. I was supposed to be one of them. "For 18 years, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the sound system, I believed in the woman standing at that podium. I built her a home with my own hands. I put her through business school. I raised her daughter and supported her career." The screens were now showing hotel receipts and credit card statements, alongside invoices from shell companies for fictitious IT upgrades and renovation consulting. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable, tens of millions siphoned from the sterling collection. "And in return," I continued, "she invited her lover to dinner at our kitchen table and asked me to participate in her intimate fantasies. While simultaneously using her position to commit systematic financial fraud against her own family's business." The room erupted in shocked whispers and gasps. Eleanor tried to speak, but no words came out. Julian was pushing through the crowd, trying to reach the stage. Bethany was frantically taking pictures with her phone, probably already composing social media posts about how I was harassing Eleanor. "This is harassment," someone shouted from the audience. "No," I replied calmly. "This is truth. This is what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. When you confuse patience with stupidity." I reached the stage and climbed the steps. Eleanor backed away from the podium, her silver gown shimmering under the lights. "You wanted everyone to see you as the victim," I said, taking the microphone. "The poor hotelier whose husband couldn't handle her romantic liberation. But victims don't lie and cheat and manipulate. Victims don't destroy their families and defraud their companies for the sake of a midlife crisis." The screens were now showing photographs I'd taken outside Julian's penthouse apartment building, Eleanor's luxury SUV parked there overnight, the two of them kissing in the lobby, evidence of a relationship that had been going on for months, intertwined with the fraudulent invoices. "So, here's the truth," I announced to the stunned audience. "My wife is an adulteress and a corporate thief. Her lover is a predator who specializes in married women and financial exploitation, and her friends are enablers who think betrayal is empowerment." Julian finally reached the stage, his face red with rage. "That's enough." He swung at me, just like he had at the lounge. But this time, I was ready. I caught his wrist, twisted his arm behind his back, and forced him to his knees in front of 300 of the Pacific Northwest's most influential people. "The funny thing about bullies," I said into the microphone while holding Julian in an arm lock, "is that they only pick fights they think they can win. But sometimes, they miscalculate." Security was finally closing in, but I wasn't finished. Eleanor wanted a new life, free from the constraints of marriage and ethical business practices. "Well, congratulations, honey. You got it." I released Julian, who scrambled away from me like a frightened animal. Eleanor was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks as the screens continued displaying the evidence of her betrayal and financial crimes. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, "I hope you'll still support the Pacific Northwest Hospitality Association. They do important work, and they shouldn't suffer because of one person's moral and financial failures." I handed the microphone back to Eleanor and walked off the stage. Security followed me, but they didn't try to stop me. What was the point? The damage was done. As I reached the exit, I turned back for one last look. Eleanor was still at the podium, trying to salvage some dignity from the wreckage of her reputation and career. Julian was nowhere to be seen, probably already in his car, fleeing the scene. Bethany and the other enablers were clustered around Eleanor, but their support looked hollow now, performative. The audience was filing out, their conversations animated with gossip, judgment, and the dawning realization of the financial scandal. By tomorrow, everyone in the Pacific Northwest's business community would know the truth about Eleanor Miller, Julian Thorne, and the tens of millions siphoned from the Sterling collection. My phone buzzed with a text from Chloe. "Dad, this is all over stream feed already. Are you okay?" I typed back, "Never better, sweetheart. I'll be home soon." As I walked to my car, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: peace. The war was over. I'd won, not through violence or cruelty, but through truth, strategy, and the meticulous application of my skills. Eleanor had wanted to destroy our marriage and my reputation in public, so I'd given her exactly what she asked for. They'd wanted a villain. I'd just given them the show of a lifetime. The narrative is complete. I divided the original text into 6 chapters, and all 6 chapters have now been rewritten according to the new variables. Lessons from this story. Betrayal and dishonesty lead to severe consequences. Strategic planning and patience can overcome perceived weakness. Truth, when revealed, can dismantle carefully constructed lies. Self-respect and dignity are worth fighting for.